Shall we begin? Episode 18. Kate and I review Stormborn. Season 7, Episode 2, Game of Thrones. Alright, let's just get right into it. At the end, Euron shows up and destroys most of or all of the Yara's fleet. Euron made his comic book-like appearance, jumping off the thing with his eyeshadow on and screaming like a crazy person.
Yeah, he was a little over the top. I think he was probably told to be that. I think they want him to be that. He's pretty eccentric, I think, in the books, and they're trying to do that, but he was a little funny.
Yeah, he definitely seems like he's trying to top Ramsay as most absurd character. I'm sure being directed to be that way. But whatever. It was... We talked about this last episode, that basically none of this was a surprise to me, really.
No, I mean, I guess... The pacing of this one, I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about the pacing of this episode, because this episode reminded me a lot of what first episodes are in previous seasons. What kind we talked about, why we liked last week's episode so much more, because it had so much more going on. But I was kind of surprised to get this battle at the end. I was like, oh, okay.
Yes, when they were originally plotting and they were talking about going to Dorne and stuff, I was like, oh, so maybe next episode we'll get the battle. I didn't expect it this episode either. Didn't expect it so soon, and I guess it has major ramifications. But most of this episode felt a little meandering to me.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm glad they gave us something solid by the end of it.
Yeah, I probably would have had much different thoughts about the episode as a whole had they not had the battle scene. Like, it improved the episode for me that they had it.
For sure. And they had the sand snakes. They just can't do a scene with them that isn't annoying.
I know. I was thinking about that too. And like, I mean, do they have to use poison as the only way to be successful? Because otherwise they were pathetic warriors.
Well, they gave Euron an okay fight, all things considered, I guess.
I don't know.
I mean, they're half his size and,
Yeah, but I don't think size should always matter. I mean, Arya is a great example of that. Like, the Faceless Men, they wouldn't be as good as they are if they couldn't accommodate all different kinds of sizes and ages and stuff. Like,
yeah, but they use things like poison and stuff. This is like, single hand combat. This setting had to be.
But they were supposed to be warriors, and their weapons weren't poison. It was the whip and the stuff that they had. Whatever. I don't pay attention to the sand snakes, but everything about them in the show was so annoying for me, including their demise. I found them all like...
I think they gave us that scene of them, and they purposely made it annoying so that we would be grateful when two of them were killed off. That's kind of how I was thinking about it.
But then that's just cheap storytelling from a show that as high a caliber as this is then. Like,
yeah, it's becoming more and more cheap storytelling, I think, though.
You were making the comment earlier of like you were a little worried about, without having the source material already written by George R. Martin, that you just didn't know if the show could be as good. And sometimes it's like, I think they have the bare bones of it and they're filling in all the rest. And I don't know. It's like you see some of those first few seasons and it was just so good. And now it's like, it's kind of more just being whipped together to get it done.
Yeah, it's major sloppy now. Like them plotting the next step at Dragonstone, you'd think that they would have had that conversation somewhere earlier in time.
That was like the theme of this episode for me, of like, shouldn't you have already had this conversation?
Well, if they're going to... Presumably, when the fleet last season left Essos and headed toward Westeros, and then we saw that Dorne was with them and Lady Olenna and stuff, presumably the fleet picked them up, right? Like on the south. And you'd think that when they picked them up, they would have them commit to using their armies. Like, it sounded like Dorne originally didn't want to use their army.
Well, and it seemed, I don't know, very whiny. Here you do have, like, all these, like these 4 powerful women around the table. I think it could have been done way better. I was a bit disappointed how that went. And I'm still kind of figuring out. You're saying that there's a lot of ramifications as a result of this battle, and I'm also figuring out the ramifications of it. Like, it really seems that everybody wants Dany to be this conqueror and kind of take all, winner take all, no mercy, which they kind of touch upon is going to play upon a lot of the fears of what people fear about her and what her family represented after the Mad King. And so is she being pushed into being this, or is that really what she just needs to come into her own and do it?
As you know, I've long predicted Dany would end up being the villain of the story. Before we go to Dany, though, let's just stick with this battle real quick. So they get whooped, which I guess
it felt so one-sided to me. What were they ever really going to accomplish if they were defeated that easily?
Yeah, I guess possibly just the setting of being snuck up on in the night made it that way. I guess my only surprise, I thought Yara was going to die at the end, which, looking at it now, I guess I'm not surprised that she survived, but I thought he was going to kill her right in front of Theon.
No, but I think Yara and, Obara?
The mother?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're the gift for Cersei. He said he's going to go get, I think, now. And that's why they've been kept alive.
Theon chickened out, which makes story sense, but I thought it was a little bit of a wasted scene because there was absolutely zero he could have done anyways.
Well, and I think he would have already had some... He would have already been triggered earlier in the battle than there.
Right.
I as someone who knows a little bit more about some of that, I didn't buy that. I mean, like, it's hard to know, and everyone has their own journey with trauma and stuff, but I just thought that it's funny how ruthless and how much of a fighter he was, and then all of a sudden that moment he can't. Like, I buy that can happen for him. I just didn't buy the win.
Right, it was more that I didn't buy that he was a capable fighter last season and this season. Like, he was killing knights defending Sansa when they escaped Winterfell last season after being all traumatized, and I thought that was a stretch, and now he's... So I buy that it happened, but I agree that...
It's not always consistent in when it pops up, so it's like you can't have any exposure at all. But I don't know, I think just the way that this went down, it's kind of like what we were talking about last week, where it's just convenient.
I think they really had to show us that it's not going to be easy for Dany, going forward. They had to take a big blow early on. Apparently, they lost a bunch of their fleet.
But like what happened at Slaver's Bay, the dragons can just shoot a bunch of fire and take out a whole fleet of ships, so...
Yeah, but they're working on a solution for that, which we'll get to later. So it did start at Dragonstone. We covered a little bit of that. I find Dany just quite unlikable.
Why?
She is so pompous and so arrogant. She threatened to burn Varys alive. Like, everyone who loves Dany didn't like Stannis, for example, but I'm starting to see a lot of parallels between the two.
But you love Stannis and hate Dany, so why is there a difference?
Because she's doing things... They tried to, in the show, paint Stannis this way, but she's doing things... Like, she has no good reason for it. She just feels entitled to be queen, and she feels that it's her destiny or something. And that is a lot out that it shows Stannis, but Book Stannis is doing it because it's his duty. He's the king. And it's not that he wants to be the king like Dany. He is the king because the rightful king died and he's the heir.
But so, I think that's where Dany comes from, the same line of thought, just from a different perspective of like, my family is supposed to be the rulers.
I mean, she's just threatening to burn people left and right. She burnt some people a few seasons ago, randomly fed another dragon. She's going to burn Varys for betrayal. But, like, think
about it, like, if from a different perspective, like, do you think Westeros has been in good care?
Oh, yeah, that was something else I was going to say. So, they talked about Robert and how he wasn't interested in being king, and that's true. But things were better under Robert than under the Targaryens. They had 17 years of peace under Robert.
Right, and they also went heavily into debt under Robert.
They did go heavily into debt, but...
Like, again, it's a matter of perspective.
People aren't getting burned alive, there's not civil wars, there's not all these things until Robert died. So I don't see the Targaryens taking over Westeros again to be a net positive, most likely. And I don't see much from Dany as she gets harder and harder, more stone cold over the seasons. And I still stick by that by the end, she's going to do some ruthless, terrible things. But the fact that Tyrion's with her makes me maybe doubt my own prediction because they're not going to want to paint Tyrion as backing the bad person.
Yeah. I'm not in the same place as you are with Dany. I'm not necessarily like a huge fan either. Like she definitely is acting somewhat full of herself in some ways, but at the same time, I also think she has to. If you're going to command respect from multiple armies and such, you have to have that persona. And imagine if she were a guy. Would it be that obvious? I think she's kind of doing what she needs to do given the position that she's in right now. I think she has to really remind herself why she's doing it, and that's kind of what bothers me a little bit about her. And I think what you're saying is like she has to remember that even though like I can buy her argument, like, no, I am the rightful queen, that she needs to come and be a queen and destroy her enemies because the enemies are bad for Westeros. Like kind of where Varys was coming from, that I need what's best for the people. And, right now I think that's you. And I just wish Dany could act a little bit more. Like, I need to do this because it's best for the people. Yeah,
Varys said he supports the people. And I thought that was a great response, I suppose. In the books, just to remind anyone who might have forgot or doesn't know, Varys is not supporting Dany in the books. he's supporting another character who's been completely not in the show.
Varys is much more shades of gray in the books too. Like he actually, his little birds, he has their tongues cut out.
Yeah, they paint him in a much better picture in the show. And he also kills Maester Pycelle and Kevin Lannister in the books.
Yeah.
And they were taken out much different in the show. Pycelle being killed by the little birds who were converted to Qyburn, and Kevin taken out in the explosion at the church. What else? Dany did something else. She commands Jon to come over and bend the knee.
That bothered me a little bit too, because that's sounding a little too much like Cersei.
Sounds like Stannis. Yeah, I think they're drawing parallels, I swear.
Well, and I was thinking about this. It's like, well, like you can't just be like, no, you don't have to bend the knee. You go do your own thing. So I get like why they have to do it, but at the same time, it's like, come on, you just get over there. Why don't you get to know people a little bit before you start demanding allegiance right off the bat, or like I'm gonna like roast you alive? Like it's just, where's the diplomacy? And I know that's part of what Tyrion's there for.
Right. There's absolutely no reason that at this point anyone would bend the knee to her except if they were Targaryen loyalists or if they're terrified of her dragons. She certainly hasn't brought any signs of like promising hope so far.
That's what Lady Olenna was telling her, is have them fear you.
Yeah, and that also I thought was a little bit of a strange conversation. I just don't really know why it was there or what Olenna was getting at. Is she only a vengeance person now?
That's what I'm afraid of, and she's just such an interesting character that has so much to her. And for her to just now become much more one-dimensional and just be like, oh, I'm all about revenge. And I get that, like, her son and her grandchildren died, and she's really upset about that. But she's just too cunning and too interesting for that to be all that she is now.
Right. It seems like a cheapening of the character.
I agree. Yeah. And so, like, kind of going back to, like, this scene a little bit and with the conversation with Varys and Dany, that's another one where it's like, you didn't have this already? This conversation? This is really funny to me.
Right. Yeah. He was even over in Essos with them, and she didn't think that question. And I keep saying to myself and in our last podcast that, it's the medium of television. They have to do things a certain way, but it's also, I'm not really buying that argument that much anymore. In
order to have a really cool season finale last year, did they just forego all these like certain parts that they're trying to fill in now? Like that's not worth it to me. It was an important conversation, and I like that Varys stood his ground and that we could hear what he had to say, but like that was a really stupid conversation to have at that point. I don't know if they were trying to show something. Like Tyrion looked a little uneasy sometimes when Dany was talking.
Well, he was definitely protective of Varys when she seemed to be threatening.
And he's also really trying to say, hey, Jon Snow's a good guy.
There was one more scene at Dragonstone when Melisandre showed up.
we are forgetting Missandei and Grey Worm.
Oh, too. Yeah, we'll get to that too. Okay. So Melisandre shows up, is immediately accepted by Dany. And then they also kind of forced the possible Azor Ahai prophecy down our throat. When she thought Stannis, like they barely used the name Azor Ahai. They just said like the chosen one or something. Now suddenly it could be Jon, it could be Dany. Which in the books, they very subtly led us to believe it could be either of them. But now we're just like all in like the span of 5 seconds. We're like, oh, wait, maybe Dany's Azor Ahai,
Yeah, they're really not letting people read between the lines with that. They're
right.
shoving that down.
By the way, that's a gender-neutral term. Okay.
But what's interesting, too, is Lady Melisandre is still kind of... She seems to continue with what happened last season, where she's more humbled now. She's able to recognize that, prophecies can be wrong. I can misinterpret things. And Dany specifically says, oh, you think I'm this? And she says, I think you have a role to play. Yeah. And so that's interesting because I think she thinks Jon is that still. I'm waiting for like that to be a conversation somewhere.
Well, I can't remember how much they've talked about in the show. I feel very little. Like the prophecy is, born of salt and smoke and all these things that book readers are familiar with. And the only time I remember them saying it in the show is when Stannis and Renly are having their parlay. And
are you a ham?
It's like, yeah, are you a ham? It's like, like you just said, they're not into reading between the lines right now, but they could tell us a little bit what the prophecy is and then make us wonder, is it real? Could it be Jon? Could it be Dany? Could it be someone else? Like in the books, you can make an argument for it being a lot of different things. But here we just know so very little about the prophecy that it's like now they're suddenly talking about it. It just seems weird to me.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be a redeeming arc for Melisandre?
I suppose so. Yeah, in some sort of way. I mean, she believes herself to be a good person, and it's not just like a fake belief. In one of the books, in the 5th book, we do get a point of view chapter from her for the first time, I think, in the 5th book. And she talks about how Davos's single son was killed in the show in the Battle of Blackwater, but he has like 7 kids in the books, and like 4 of them are killed in the Battle of Blackwater or something, and Melisandre purposely sends them away or something so that they won't die. Like, she wants to protect Davos's children because he already lost so much.
Yeah.
So we can see that she actually has some empathy or whatever, and she believes that she and Stannis and maybe Jon, are truly protectors of the world. And, Stannis also believed this. He wasn't an evil guy. He thought he had to protect the world. I guess she'll have some kind of role to play against the White Walkers.
Why do you think she didn't tell Dany and all of them when she was there that she brought Jon Snow back to life? So, like, clearly she's choosing not to. She's holding that card to her chest.
Yeah.
Why?
They'll just have some convenience. It'll be revealed at a convenient time for her
okay.
or something.
Well, they better, because otherwise that's annoying to me.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. But right, if you say that, this person was killed and now he's alive, you would think that would give him some
that would be worthy information to share.
I didn't even think about that.
So, like, to me, clearly she's not on purpose, so why? But, yeah.
All right, so before we jump over to Jon, yes, we got a little romance with the eunuch and Missandei.
Yeah, that's all TV show, nothing in the book like that. I mean, Sandy's a child,
right,
in the book, so
it didn't really bother me. I guess only in the sense that it was precious time being eaten up. That I wonder if it was necessary. But I mean,
I see that point of view, but it's also something too where I like that the show is trying to have some of its own characters and develop them more, rather than they just be like props to the other ones that we know.
Right.
And so clearly Grey Worm and Missandei are given a lot more characterization in the show, and I think they're trying to keep up with that. A lot of people are fans from the book, so you carry so much of that love over, where when you have like these brand new characters, it's kind of harder to have that. But it was kind of sweet.
I kept trying to imagine what it would be like to have no Franken beans and still be doing sexy time. Like, I don't think I don't know. Your testes are responsible for that stuff, right?
No, that's not actually true. That's part of it, but there's a lot of sexual drive in the brain still as well. Okay. So I mean, this is something where a lot of people who like paraplegics, for example, like there's still a drive. There's still something that can be there. Your brain and hormones still play a very big role, just because you don't have the equipment. Okay. And so that's still a need.
Because it showed in previous seasons, it showed the Unsullied who wanted to be snuggled, which kind of made sense. They've had these hard lives and they were stolen from their parents at a young age. So they wanted to be comforted by, like, they would hire prostitutes to just hang out and lay down with them. Yeah, I guess I'm happy for Grey Worm and Missandei until something terrible happens to one of them. It didn't bother me. I think my prediction is we're going to hear a lot of complaining about it in other reviews and on Facebook and stuff, but it didn't bother me.
Yeah, I don't have too strong of an opinion either way on it.
Okay, so now to Winterfell. I think Sansa was right and Jon shouldn't go, and she was maybe wrong, I guess, to argue with him in public.
Yeah, that was annoying to me again, where it's like, come on,
the
Sansa.
Same thing again? What is this, 3 episodes in a row now?
I don't know if it's how Sophie Turner's portraying her, or if she's just a petulant child sometimes, her character. But, like, that was annoying to me again. Like, squabbling like that is just not very... Like...
It's the show. It's so... What I mean by that is that they had a private conversation where they aired these differences, but apparently they didn't resolve them. Because when Jon said he was going to go, Sansa seemed... I don't know if shocked is the right word, but distraught. So apparently they bring him up in private.
Maybe they had resolved their differences because he shares the note with her and asks her what she thinks about Tyrion. Like, he's literally doing what she asked for and getting her opinion. And then it's right back to the same old thing. And I'm just like, oh, God, okay.
But I think she was right here. Maybe not, like I said, to argue about it, but he shouldn't go. And I like that they brought up the history of Jon's grandfather, Ned's father. This came up in my mind twice. And Ned's brother, Brandon, they got invited by the Mad King, or they went to face the Mad King. And father got burned alive in his armor. And
right. The thing is the king demanded that Rickard Stark come, and if he didn't come, it would be an act of war. So there wasn't really a choice for Rickard Stark not to come.
Yeah, but I mean, Dany said, "Come and bend the knee."
And that's what's not said. So everybody's right. It is a trap for Jon because their whole King of the North thing is that we are separate from you. And so if they're forcing him into position by saying, "Hey, come here," and they're going to force him to bend the knee or...
But yeah, so he's going, and Davos is going, and Melisandre is there, so they're going to meet again. Very short order, apparently, unless she's not around. Or maybe if... Well, it showed in the preview that they are going to meet. I was going to say maybe that Euron will mess that up.
Is Davos the Hand? Why do you think he chose Davos? And
so this is something... I'm being nitpicky here, but is Davos... we're supposed to believe his character is just a follower. He followed Stannis, and a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know if that makes sense. Makes a little more sense in the book than the show or whatever, but now Stannis is dead, and he just, next episode, he found a new guy to follow. Is he just his character is just to be that loyal little following guy? And makes sense if he's gonna sail Jon over there. He's, whatever.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where the loyalty comes from, because I was just thinking about it,
no,
am I forgetting? Why did he want Jon brought back to life so badly?
No, it felt very forced last season, too. It didn't really make sense.
Of all the people who die all the time in this world, why was he so, bring him back, you can do it, why was Davos drawn to him? Because we get why Davos was drawn to Stannis, but where does this loyalty get inspired?
No, it feels weird to me. And of course, it's not what's happening in the books at this point. Davos he goes to House Manderley, which is, they mentioned it tonight, the harbor or whatever it's called. And he goes there to try to get help for Stannis, who's still alive. And they say, you got to go to this cannibal island and save Rickon, who is not held by the Boltons. So it's so completely different.
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen. I think Stannis is going to live a lot longer, so Davos will not be helping Jon come back to life. It's all going to be so different in the books. But, where were we? Oh, so I was glad that they brought up very briefly, Sansa drew attention to her family, because I thought about it again when Littlefinger and Jon got into a fight. Littlefinger's history is that he always had a thing for Catelyn Stark, and he had it so strong that he challenged Brandon Stark, Catelyn's betrothed, to a duel, and Brandon tooled him, left a big scar on his stomach, and would have killed him, but Catelyn stopped him. And this scene made me think of that again, that Littlefinger is relearning, in case he forgot, that he cannot hang with the Starks on their terms, or he cannot be any kind of respected physical presence. He has to play behind the shadows.
Yeah, but what was interesting is, so when he was into Cat and they were kids, he wasn't respected in terms of his standing in the society. Where here, he's not respected because of what he's done and the person he's become. So it's the same thing, but now it's of his own choosing and what he's made himself be. But what was so interesting to me is has he completely gone off the deep end for Sansa? Because Littlefinger is a very calculated person who is strategizing all the time, 12 moves ahead. And here, he's just acting reckless and stupid. I already thought, him sneaking up on Jon in that burial chamber they have in the Starks.
Right.
What a stupid...
Pretty disrespectful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for Littlefinger to do that seems so obvious to me. I don't know. I keep finding little mistakes in characters, and this was an episode where so many characters I felt are getting cheapened. No, I'm not a huge fan of Littlefinger, but I like that because you don't want to love all of them. You want to love to hate some of them too. And he's kind of one where you're you gotta appreciate his cleverness, and he's anti-clever here in every step of the way. You think saying I loved your stepmom and now your sister is going to make Jon feel good?
Right. It all went downhill for Littlefinger's character when he threw the girl out the window, Lysa Arryn, and he left his fate up to whether Sansa chose to tell the truth or lie about it. In the books, of course, he kills her too, but he doesn't leave himself so vulnerable.
Well, I can actually still buy that a little bit because it's a great way for him to kind of gain a relationship with her because he makes himself so vulnerable.
But, yeah.
It is risky, and I think he would be willing to do it for probably no one but Sansa, but it allows you to kind of see oh, okay, that's why they can kind of have this weird relationship that they have then because of that big move. But now it's like, I don't know who that guy is. He just seems like this annoying guy who's hanging around that nobody wants. And just keeps giving
dude,
creepy stares at Sansa while they have these big meetings.
Well, let's just hope and assume that there actually is some smart plotting going on. And at some point this season we'll be like, wow, that was a good move by Littlefinger. He was setting that up the whole time. Something like that. But it doesn't look promising. Okay, anything else with Winterfell?
I did comment to you when we were watching where someone goes, well, the whites and the walkers can be killed by fire, and she does have 3 dragons. And I looked at you and I was like, they're just figuring that out now?
Right, yeah. Oh, I know. And then, just to bitch for a second, every episode I bitch about how they gave Stannis' story to Jon, but Jon's like, we need to mine Winterfell. So for one thing, that's what Stannis is doing in the books, but for another thing, they already knew there was dragonglass there because Stannis told Sam 6 episodes ago that Dragonstone is full of dragonglass. Yeah. I don't know why Sam had to read it in a book.
And did Sam sneak a raven?
Not only sneak a raven, but last episode we didn't even mention that he snuck into those books, and now he's sneaking Jorah Mormont. He's a sneaky little guy. So okay, let's get out of Winterfell and go to Mormont because we're there. The only quick thing I want to say, last thing in Winterfell that I'm kind of grateful for is that when little Lyanna Mormont stood up and started giving a speech, I was like, oh god, she's gonna save Jon again. But no, she agreed with Sansa, and so I was like, that's gonna get old if she's always.
I did think in that moment that I got reminded of, it's like poor Jon keeps getting sucked into these commander roles, and he keeps being himself. It's like he can't help himself by being like, I gotta do what's right. I gotta let the wildlings through. I gotta go meet the queen and get this dragon glass. Even though everybody's against me, I gotta still do this. And so it's like Jon just keeps being in these same roles.
Sounds dangerously like Robb.
Over and over again. Well, and Robb got killed, Jon got killed. Right. So it's kind of like
the Stark curse.
Yeah, it's just interesting how he keeps having to be this guy to stand up for something when everyone else is against you. Yeah. And that seems similar. But he does know how bad it is. And I think it really is hard for people to imagine, not only because they thought that the whites and the walkers were legend at this point, but just to be told, yeah, there's a bunch of zombies this way, but then to see what Jon saw at Hardhome, I think people just can't put it all together of how really bad that is. Yeah. Yeah, so now, okay, so Sam is sneaking around doing forbidden treatment on Jorah Mormont. You know what? I do love this. I'm a Sam fan right now. I love the way that he's being played by that actor. He kind of makes me laugh each time, and I like that. Sam's got some confidence. Yeah, he's definitely more risk taker than he used to be. This dragon scale story, I assume, has to go somewhere. I kind of hope it doesn't. I hope he just cures Jorah and they go on their merry way and do some good things. But why have it in the story if it's not going to go somewhere? And they said that the last guy who tried to find a cure died of grayscale. I don't think that'll happen to Sam, but I do wonder if that's foreshadowing of what I've been predicting, where there's some kind of grayscale outbreak due to Jorah, which would just be sad. But last episode they talked about how the Citadels, the Timekeepers, and the Macers, what if they all get grayscale or something, Hope it doesn't happen, but I assume that plotline is there for a reason. I did really like how there's still allegiance to Jeor Mormont, Jorah's dad. Yep. What a great guy he was. I mean, he was only part of the Night's Watch because he was so offended for his house by the actions of his son that he gave up everything and joined the Night's Watch and passed power on to the next generation. He joined of his own volition. There's a touching scene when Jorah's killed in the books. Yeah. He's laying in Sam's lap, and he's telling Sam some personal things, and he says, tell my son Jorah to take the black, which they cut out of the show. And I remember being kind of upset that wasn't in the show, because I felt like that just... There's no reason... It's a very touching scene. Yeah, there's no reason not to have it. He basically forgives Jorah. He's like, come and take the black, and I forgive him. He's like, I still got love for my son, despite everything that happened. And here, Sam is the one who was with Jeor when he died, and now he's with Jorah and can convey this message. Why couldn't they have had this in the show? I just wonder if in the books, maybe Jorah will take the black,
But in the show, maybe this grayscale plotline that is not in the books won't, and that's why they took it off the table or something. Who knows?
Well, and maybe the whole grayscale thing isn't like where it's going to be like a disastrous thing, but maybe because Sam does this for him and helps him, like I think Sam is going to stop it. I don't know if cure is the right word, but stop it. And maybe because of what Sam does for him and because of who his father was, that Jorah is going to now go take the black and become a warrior and a knight of what he's capable of to defend, bring honor back to his house in terms of the honor that he took away. And so that could be where this goes. I mean, that would be fun to see.
He'd be a great Lord Commander,
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
fit for the role and everything.
Poor Ed could probably use the help.
Yeah. I think I had it wrong. I said last week that Ed was the 1000th Lord Commander. I think he's 999.
Okay.
I'm going to pause real quick and look it up. Okay, just Googled it. Yeah, John was 998. Assuming that Ed is 999. If there's 1000th, maybe it'll be Mormont.
Yeah, and I just want to say last week I referred to Micah as the baker's boy, and that's Hunger Games. He's the butcher's boy.
We make mistakes.
And we were also talking about how old Westeros is, and it's about 12,000 years old. Yeah,
right? the recorded history of Westeros is about 12,000. All right, so should we go to King's Landing?
Yeah.
All right, so I thought that Cersei had a really good pitch to the people about how she's bringing Dothraki over, and we saw...
And she's not wrong. That's not a lie, at least in that part. Well, Dany told them they couldn't do that anymore, though, I guess.
Couldn't do what?
They couldn't be Dothraki.
Oh, yeah, well. But, yeah, nobody knows that anyways. But we saw when we met Randall Tarley last season that he had a big problem with wildlings and,
He's a really surly dude.
Yeah. But I think it was a good play on the outsiders. These outsiders are coming to our land. It felt a little familiar to me, with our current conditions in the world. So I thought she made a good pitch, and I like that scene. I think that might have been one of the better scenes in King's Landing, along with the battle.
Well, and I think what I appreciated is that it does show that Jaime's very well aware that nobody likes Cersei at all. And that if he doesn't go out of his way to try and do some stuff, he's much more diplomatic. He's actually quite skilled at doing whatever he needs to do. And even though sometimes it makes his character less likable, like what he did with Edmure Tully, he's very skilled at getting the job done. I think that people really underestimate him. And I think because he's lost his hand, he's been forced to have to really reinvent himself. And that he's becoming a more interesting person because of that. It's forced him and propelled him into this... more I guess I have to use other parts of my body and maybe my brain a little bit more than, just being this, badass sword fighter. And, he's really kind of behind the scenes making this happen. I think, Cersei, if she didn't have Jaime, it would just be ridiculous.
Yeah. And Randall Tarley, that's Sam's dad, he's a badass. They talked about it a little. He was the only person to defeat Robert's army in Robert's Rebellion. In the Game of Thrones kind of nerd fandom, there's debates, who's the best fighter, who's the best warrior. And, it's usually Arthur Dayne or Barristan Selmy or Robert Baratheon. But then there's a sub-debate of who's the best military genius. And it's usually Randall Tarley and Stannis Baratheon on the list. Those are kind of considered the two best. And Littlefinger said, Stannis is the best military commander, but that didn't work out. So I'm hoping that for Randall Tarley, we'll get to actually see some of that reputation. And maybe he'll do some good fighting. I think that'd be cool.
I also like that this is maybe one part of the script of today's episode that I did like a little bit more was how Tarly referenced all this backstabbing and lack of loyalty and with the Lannisters and stuff. And he's like, hey, my house is loyal. We don't go around killing people after they eat, salt and drink in our house. We don't go around butchering people the way that you guys have. And it's kind of I like that. It's not like everyone just comes together and says kumbaya and let's just be allies. It's kind of saying, hey, I don't respect how you guys got here. That's a concern for me. That is not forgotten. Right.
But then he did seem to cave a minute later.
Yeah.
But I agree. It was kind of like the scene with the Lannisters last week, who were, a group of merry men, the nicest people in Westeros.
What do you think he's supposed to do in that situation, though?
Randall?
Yeah.
Well, I think that they laid the groundwork, like I said earlier, with him hating wildlings so much and him being so repulsed at dinner when a wildling was there with him, that when she made that argument about the Dothraki, I think they laid the groundwork for him being like, a proud Westerosi nationalist, So that was pretty good. But
he's just a bigot.
Right. But then but Jaime had to convince him, I don't know what he should do.
Because, as you see with the Boltons and their kind of rise to power, if you bite off more than you can chew, your whole house can be wiped out.
If I remember correctly, Jaime even said, or Cersei maybe said, I think it was Jaime, that Lady Olenna was once a great woman and now she's just...
Cersei. She just wants revenge.
Right, and that's kind of the conversation we already had this episode. Is Olenna really just that? If that's the case, which they seem to show us that maybe it is, maybe Randall Tarley should bail. I just don't know that it's realistic that he would back what appears to be a pretty obviously losing side at this point.
But at the same time, in Lady Olenna's defense, if someone offs all 2 generations of your house and you don't retaliate, how's that going to make your house look? And they're a great house. Of course she needs to retaliate. I just don't like how they're portraying her as just this revenge-hungry, one-dimensional woman who's very seasoned and wise. She's right. She stuck around for a long time. She's been around a lot of, bullshit before.
Well, and also I guess it's true. I mean, Cersei did kill her entire family, but it's not like there wasn't another element with the Faith Militant. Tyrells were kind of screwed at that point anyways. Lancel just had his face all carved, and I can't remember what was going to happen with Margie, but she was going on trial. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that was all temporary because once the Faith Militant was taken care of, they just needed Loras back. So if they could get Loras back, then they could just marry him off and have things be fine. Everything's fine now. Had they survived that, the Faith Militant, everything they represent is gone now. Yeah. Which, to me, is also a little bit hard to believe because even though a lot of them were gone, they were supposed to be this huge organization at that point, and not everybody could have been in that sept. And a lot of, the people were behind them. So wouldn't there be, an open revolt of the people?
Well, right. So I feel like seasons 1 through 4 of Game of Thrones was one long season, really. It was 40 episodes of a continuing story. Season 5 and 6 are structured more like a traditional television show where, you think about Dexter, every season of Dexter, they introduce the new bad guy at the beginning and then they have it resolved at the end. I feel like that's kind of how the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones has been. They introduce the Boltons as in charge of Winterfell, and then they're killed off at the end, just in time for Euron to become the bad guy. And what were you just talking about? Oh, the Faith Militant. They introduce them, and then now that story's completely over, and they've moved on to something else. Whereas, in the real world, dominoes don't fall so easily in place like that. And I think that's been a weakness the last couple seasons of introduce plot, resolve it.
Well, and it's been introduced, too, that there's no food for all the inhabitants in King's Landing. It's winter now, so it's not like people can grow any more crops. The Tyrells were supplying all the food. So when the Tyrells pulled out, how is King's Landing being fed? They should be starving at this point.
And it's not like the show didn't make that specific point. If we as book readers only knew that because we read the books, then we couldn't really say anything. But in the show, they did make that specific point. So it's then they just forget about it? Why did they even have that conversation before?
And when did Cersei find out that Dorne and Lady Olenna were with Dany?
Right, yeah, that's it.
Because remember, last week we were does she know? Because she didn't quite say that yet. Now here she knew, but how does she know that Lady Olenna represents all of the Tyrells?
Well, so that reminds me, and this will lead us to our last section, is that we complained last week about how news seems to travel super fast, and some characters... John's going to end up probably at Dragonstone super fast. But the one time they're actually seem to be following proper scale timeline was Arya's story. She's walking across Westeros. She goes to the inn. She switches directions. She's stuck out in the wild. She seems to be the only one that actually has things happen to her while she's traveling, and traveling takes a long time. And that's kind of how the first few seasons were. So that was Arya's scene today. It was traveling, meeting up with the guy at the inn, and then...
Hot pie, yep.
And then choosing to turn around and go back north to go to the wall.
Yeah, do you buy that she didn't hear that Jon was king of the north at that point and that Sansa's up there?
I don't know. So I guess... Right, that's what we don't know is how much time has passed.
But she's also somebody where listening and picking up information, that's her thing. that's a really big oversight. I didn't really buy that she didn't know that
Right.
yet.
You think that when she was at the Frey Castle, at least, they would have heard about that.
Yeah, well, and like they go out of their way in this episode to show her just kind of eating, listening to those guys talking. That's what she's trained to do. That's what she did all the time when she played all those roles in Bravos. And then here, she didn't know something that huge. And I think it was just used as like a plot device to kind of like, oh, Arya's going to go back up north, which, yeah, it would be super cool. But like, that just didn't make any sense to me.
But she found her wolf. So that's fair.
If I remember correctly, Nymeria is the only wolf left alive of all, with the exception of Ghost, but of the actual Stark children.
Yeah.
And I liked that Nymeria went her own way here because all the other ones that stuck with their Stark children died. And I feel like the only way that Nymeria can actually live is to not be with them.
Do you think that we're going to see Nymeria again? Was that just a come and go? Or do you think that it's going to be a recurring thing?
It will be annoying to me if she doesn't come back. I think, she's got her own wolf clan here. And this is, I think, something that people speculate about, that you feel pretty good about it, but I don't think it's actually confirmed that it's Nymeria in the books.
Oh, is she with? I don't remember.
In the books, they haven't talked like that there's been sightings of a really huge wolf, and there's like a growing number of like wolves.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's basically we're led to believe that Nymeria is kind of like uniting the clans of wolves and running them all.
Yeah.
So it's not like a secret, but I don't think it's overtly said in the books at all. And I do think Arya wargs into her sometimes when she sleeps.
Yeah, that's one thing that seemed to have left out of the show, is that it's possible that all the Starks are some degree of warg. You know. I was going to end with Arya, but we forgot the super crossbow to kill the dragon. I was kind of hoping, I didn't know if it was happening, I was hoping the mountain would kill a dragon somehow, just cut its head off, like, holy shit. But I don't think that's going to happen. So
the physics and the mechanics behind that spear being able to hit a moving dragon...
Yeah, maybe there'll be more than one spear, or I think it's plausible. And that would make sense why they showed Drogon being hurt so bad by the spears in season 5. Because I remember being like, God, this dragon's kind of a puss.
They haven't been tested yet, and they haven't been educated about how to be in battle yet. They just know, like, when she says Dracarys and, like, breathe fire. But, think about it. Like, horses are trained for battle. These dragons have to be trained, and they haven't been trained yet.
Yeah.
I also thought that dragon head was supposed to be really thick.
Right, yeah. It made it halfway through that skeleton head, which, if it was going to get through the skin, it should have gone all the way through that skeleton. But, okay, so I think one of the dragons is going to be killed by that thing. Maybe there'll be a few of those things. So I'm re-listening to the books, and they talk about Melisandre wants to wake up a stone dragon in Dragonstone.
Yeah.
And then there's rumors of an ice dragon in Winterfell or the Wall or something, I can't remember. So I actually thought, when he said we're working on that, I thought he was going to zombify some kind of dragons, which would have been really interesting, because the Targaryens tried to bring back the dragons and failed, and kept trying and failing, but Qyburn has shown that he's a scientist who can bring the mountain back to life. So I thought maybe they're going to go that direction, but I was wrong. So it appears we only have the main 3 dragons, and one will be killed by a giant crossbow. I'm going to predict the small one.
Do you know the other 2's names?
Drogon's the big one.
Yeah, the other 2.
Viserion and... I don't remember.
Rhaegal or something?
We Googled it. What are they called?
Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion.
Yeah. One of them will be killed by that.
So you think Rhaegal or Viserion is gonna...
Yeah, but then there's supposed to be 3 dragon riders, at least in the book. So if that is a literal translation, that could be figurative. But 3 dragon riders, 3 people to ride the dragons. If one's killed by a crossbow,
maybe that's why Jon's going to Dragonstone.
Yeah, they are related.
Like maybe a dragon is gonna be like, "Hey, Jon, what's up, man?"
Yeah, so the 3 dragon riders would be Jon, Dany, and Tyrion. Tyrion riding a dragon, I just think, would look strange. But they can give him the smallest one. Yeah, I guess the big question would be, are Jon and Dany going to get along, or are they going to fight? I assume they're going to get along. And Dany, I don't even know if she has any idea that there's White Walkers out there. So.
No. And I think if she's anything like what she used to be, she's going to care about that. Because there's no point And they even say it, I think, in this episode, like, she doesn't want to be Queen of Ash. And if the White Walkers come and destroy everything, she's not going to be queen of anything. So I'd like to think that she would be pretty open to hearing what Jon had to say, but I think Melisandre and Tyrion are also going to really fight for her to listen to Jon.
Well, if she continues to be Stannis 2.0, she'll immediately take her dragons to the wall and do the right thing.
But then, wouldn't it just be over? We still have a whole, like, season next year.
Well, she's not the queen who cared. Cool. All right. Good?
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Thanks for joining, as always.
Yeah.
Hey, see you guys next week.
Bye.